Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Anneke's Quest. My name is Anneke. Now, you may know me from my knitting videos, and this is something different. This is where I take you along on my way to a smallholding in Wales. So there are two things going on here. One is my quest for a smallholding or a homestead if you're in the United States. And the other one is me taking you along for this drive in the countryside. Let me start by explaining why I'll take you along for this drive in the countryside. Surroundings influence people. And that may be real when you look outside of your window and you see your surroundings, or when they're imagined whilst you're looking at your tablet or, other screen device thing. And that influences you, and for me, it also inspires me. What I see inspires me. So when I say, I get inspired by my surroundings or by nature or by whatever it is, when I talk about my surroundings, this is it. This is, me getting out of the door and starting to drive. This is where I am. I always like it when people put in short videos of, their surroundings, and when they get in a car, what does it look like? As I said, this is what it looks like to me, for me. That's one reason of this video, just for you to enjoy this ride along with me. The second one is a bit more long-winded, and that is my quest for a smallholding or a homestead. And I've been looking for a smallholding or a homestead for as long as I've been in Great Britain, and that's 1999, so it's a long, long time. Now, I've moved many a times, and I never had my own farm, my own homestead. In Great Britain, there's a distinction between a smallholding and a farm. Now, there are small holdings. They could be 4 acres, but they're well established. And most probably out of my price range as well. But if you want to create your own smallholding from scratch, you need at least 12.5 acres. The place I'm going to look at the end of this video is about 35 acres. Now, I will tell you now, before you get to the end of the video, this video is only the drive. It's a long video, and it's only driving to the smallholding. I do arrive there at the end, after going up and down the lane several times. But yes, you won't see the smallholding itself. I don't know when you are watching this. This drive was the end of May 2023. So who knows? You might be watching this in the year 3000 or something, and driving along in the countryside might be very archaic. I don't know. But yeah, it was an interesting experience. Let's put it that way. So why do I want a smallholding? Because, as you know, most of the videos I've made over the past couple of months are of knitting. And for me, on the whole, knitting is usually a seasonal thing. And in the summer, I tend to grow food, grow herbs, and preserve food and things. Herbs for medication, and food. So I've got something to eat over the winter. That's what I want to get back into. At the moment I live in a house with a small garden, and I can't really do anything with the garden, but I want to get back into that. I also want to keep on designing clothes and making clothes. And again, living in the countryside is a great source of inspiration for that. And I would like to have my own therapy centre, because since I've been in Great Britain, which is a long time ago, I've retrained from engineer to all things alternative healthcare. So that when people come to me, I can provide as wide a range of therapies as possible. Also, I'd like people to be able to stay, but I have to say, once I get that up and running, I'm not running a hotel, and people would have to kind of adhere to my schedule, which means early mornings. I'm a morning person, and it would mean early mornings. But for whoever can live with that and wants a more intensive therapy experience, then they're more than welcome to stay. As I said, as soon as I've got it up and running. That are the things I would like to do once I've got the small holding. Oh, by the way, if you enjoy the content, whether that's this particular video or my normal videos, the ones I've done recently, please subscribe. That would be absolutely amazing, because at this moment in time, according to the analytics, only 10% of the viewers have subscribed, and it would make a huge difference if everyone who watches the videos also subscribe. Also hit the notification bell so you get notified whenever there's a new video coming up. But that would be amazing. Right, back to this video. If you see me swerving over the road, then that's to miss the potholes. If you see the camera shocking and shaking and wobbling all over the place, then I've actually hit a pothole. There are plenty to go around, and at times difficult to miss. So I'm sorry about that. I do my best, and hitting potholes is not very good for your car. But here we are. Also, you will notice that the roads are getting progressively narrower. Now, this particular road still has a white stripe in the middle, which is amazing, because it means that there's space for 2 cars at once, and there's space basically. So once the line disappears, the roads become narrower and less space. So when you meet a car, you have to be careful, or when you meet a car, you have to find a spot to pass each other. Sometimes there are bits added to the road where you can safely pass each other. Sometimes you just have to find the entrance to a field or whatever to make, to keep things safe. And as you will find at the very end of the video, there are a couple of times where I have to reverse to get to the nearest place where we can pass, and even then both cars end up in the verge. But it is what it is, and I've lived in Wales for 5 years, and it was amazing. But once I had to reverse again, I was like, oh yes, I remember that. Also, when you know that you're slow, relatively slow, compared with the people around you, it is nice to pull in somewhere and let people pass, because most of those roads you can't pass each other. It's just too narrow. The roads are very winding, and you can't see what's coming ahead, so it's very dangerous to overtake. So if you know that you're holding up traffic, it's nice to pull over And, it would be nice if tractors would do the same sometimes, and sometimes they do. Sometimes they pull in somewhere and let traffic pass, and sometimes they don't. I remember one time when we still lived south of Hereford, I started driving in Allensmoor behind a tractor, and every time I thought the tractor would pull over, it didn't. And I followed that same tractor all the way from Allensmoor to just north of Brecon. Now you can look that up on the map. That's a very, very, very long way, going only a couple of miles an hour. So we went all the way through the Golden Valley to Hay-on-Wye, and from Hay-on-Wye south, and then just above Brecon, that's where I needed to be, and it stopped. And I thought, really, there was no place for you to let anyone pass. But such is life. Sometimes you have to just take it the way you get it, and that's how I got it that way that day. And it was a very slow drive to Brecon. It's to tell something about the small holding. So what am I looking for? Basically, I'm looking for land. It would be lovely if I could buy a farm or a small holding. But at this moment in time, the reality is that anything with a house on it is extremely expensive. And a lot of people from the southeast are coming this way, and they bring along a lot of money and price everyone out of the market. Of course, it is what it is. But yeah, they sometimes have very rose-tinted glasses on when they come and view properties. And at this particular property, there were also, because it was an open day, so a lot of people could walk around by themselves, and there were a lot of people rocking up in very big, expensive four-wheel drive cars. A lot of people who weren't quite dressed for the occasion. A lot of people with an accent from not around here, which, I'm not from around here either. But it was telling how few locals there were. And in a way, that's a shame. But it is what it is, and that's the current reality. So even though this particular property does have a bungalow on it, which is in dire need of, if you say repair, then it's putting it mildly. The best thing to do would be to start from scratch, really. So this particular property does have a bungalow on it. It was priced relatively low, so I was very curious why. And I think the reason why is to attract the buyers who actually came to see it. And it's by informal tender, so it will go for more than double the price. I'm in no doubt about that. So in the end, that leaves me with finding land, just land, and live in a mobile home for a while, which is a route I can take, and I'm happy with that. So that's absolutely fine. What I'm looking for is either for the land to be magical, or for me to be able to put that in the land. And I don't know, you might be a city dweller who's never been looking for a house in the countryside. That's possible. I've seen many places by now. The 5 years I've lived in Wales, I spent most of that time looking for a place. We lived in Norfolk, we did the same. and all the time we've been in Herefordshire, I've done the same again. So I've seen a lot of properties, and there are those properties that when you arrive, you just can't help but exhale. You can't help but relax. You can't help but just, I don't know what it is. And if I've got the chance, I've always done this, to take the children along with me. And of course, my son and daughter are both gone now, as in, they've left the house. But last year I went to see a property which was just land, and I went to see it with my daughter just because I wanted her opinion on it. And I'd been there already, and I thought it was quite special. And she got out of the car and walked the land. And she lives in London now, so she's surrounded by stress. And you could just see her relax. And I said, what do you make of it? She said, yeah, feels like Rachel. Now, Rachel is a friend of ours, and she lives in a most adorable place in Mid Wales. And her place, her site, her house, everything, it's got this special X factor, whatever it is. And when a piece of land feels like Rachel, that's a compliment. So I love to take my kids along. When they were tiny, as in really, really small, they were sitting in car seats in the car. One day I rocked up to a farm somewhere in the middle of nowhere to go and have a look. And we drove up to to where the property started, but there was a big front garden. It was a farm, it had lots of land. And the children were sitting in the car, and they were looking at the house, and they said, yeah, we've seen it now, let's go. I said, I beg your pardon? Yeah, no, we've seen it, it's good, let's go now. I thought, that's odd. I mean, they knew the drill. We were going to get out of the car and we were going to have a look around the house. And they were so reluctant to even get out of the car, so I had to hold their hands and all the rest of it. And when I walked up to the house, it was just scary. It was spooky. There was something there, and I can't put my finger on it, but something did not want us there. I did go and walk around the house itself, but even looking through the window, that felt not right. It was such a spooky thing, and that was the first time I realized that taking the children along on those adventures was actually a good thing, and they had a better developed sixth sense than I have. So yeah, that was a good lesson to learn. So that was the other end of the scale. So apart from houses that or places that have got this magical X factor where you can just relax, there are also those places where you go like, nope, not for £1,000,000. I'm not going to live in this. Even if you would give it to me with money to spare, no, it's a no from me. And then there are the places that are just, they're trying to sell them as a place which needs a lick of paint, and you can see the subsidence already, where you go like, this is more than a lick of paint. And subsidence is a really, really big issue. So yeah, you have to have your wits about you, and even then, there's things you miss, and it's always good to visit a place several times if you're really, really, really interested. There have been some really, if I say close calls, that would be the wrong way to describe it. I've been close to buying properties, and for some reason it didn't happen. several here in Herefordshire. And one was, planning in Great Britain seems to be a thing. Planning in Herefordshire. Yeah, it's its own beast. Shall we put it like that? That's I think quite accurate. So at this moment in time, even though this particular road trip is to go and view a small holding, which on paper had everything I wanted on paper. But paper doesn't necessarily show you the elevation or the reality of how steep an elevation is. And it doesn't give you any sense of this X factor, whether it's the right thing or not. And as I said before, this is not going to be the place. I won't be in a bidding war. Well, it's not going to be a bidding war. It's going to be informal tender. But I'm not going to be involved because it didn't have this X factor. It wasn't the place where I thought, yes, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to spend the next, however many years. And when I move again now, I want it to be for a very, very long time. I have moved around so much. And moving in itself doesn't really hold any mysteries or secrets or whatever to me. It's you pack your stuff or have it packed for you, one of the two. And then, I usually pack a lot of my own stuff. And then, moving it to a new place. Unpack, settle in, and repeat after about a year and a half. That's been my reality for the past couple of years. So moving in itself is fine. It is one of those things, whatever. But I'm fed up with it now. I really, really, really want to go and settle and put down roots and have a space for myself where I can do all the things I've ever wanted to do and more. That's what I'm looking for. And if other people can be part of that, whether that be through videos like this one and all the other things I do and make, or whether it is because they come to me for therapy, that's the aim. That's what I want. Because keeping it for myself at this moment in time would feel selfish. Everyone's got their own stories when the lockdown happened, and so have I. And seeing, watching videos and seeing people going through their lives, it helped me so much. It helped me so much, and it gave me courage and just that little bit of oomph you sometimes need when you don't seem to have it yourself. And it's just that's what I want for other people as well. If I can give them that extra bit of oomph for the day, or if they can get inspired by whatever it is I'm showing, that's all fine by me. I was on a Zoom call the other day, and it was a Zoom call for knitters. And one of the participants was creating a garment, and the garment didn't fit, and she wasn't going to enjoy it. And there were, even though it was a nice product and it was well made and all the rest of it, for her body shape and what she wanted out of the garment, it wasn't going to happen. And so we had a bit of a discussion about, what do you want? And the end result was that I made a sketch of a cardigan and showed it to her. And I said, I think this would suit your body much better, and it would, enhance your features and all the rest of it. And she particularly liked one element of that sketch. So she said, would you mind if I use that? And I was like, go for it, take it and run. Inspiration comes from wherever. I created the sketch just for you to have a better end result if this helps. So I'm now looking forward to whatever she's going to create next. And whether she's going to incorporate any of the things I suggested doesn't matter. If she uses it as a springboard to create something completely different, absolutely fine. Or maybe she doesn't use any of it. That's fine as well. It's a thing with inspiration, isn't it? It can take you from one thing to the next, and you think you want one thing, and you end up with something completely different. Right, I don't know if you've just noticed, but on the road it said slow, and it also said araf. And araf is slow in Welsh. So you will notice that a lot of the signs are bilingual, which is useful because, again, I don't speak Welsh, and I find it very difficult to read or to relate to. It doesn't fit into anything I really know. It sounds really different as well. Unlike Norwegian or Danish or Swedish, that when I read it, I can't read it because I don't know the language, but when I see a text, then I can kind of suss out what it's about. And in Norwegian, when people are reading a text out loud, it makes sense. Denmark, no. I don't know what the Danish do, but Danish to me sounds very different from what I can see on paper. Welsh, if you've never seen Welsh written down before, it's interesting. Yeah, they use a lot of the same letters. I think they've missed out a couple, but they seem to understand each other. So yeah, there's that. And it sounds beautiful. Welsh sounds very melodic, and the Welsh have a very strong tradition of storytelling, of music. They have an Eisteddfod every year? I think every year. Anyway, which is a gathering in Wales all about Welsh culture. And music and storytelling is a big part of that. Who knows? Maybe if I end up in Wales, if I end up in Wales, in a Welsh-speaking part of Wales, then I definitely need to learn Welsh. And I might end up in the Eisteddfod, who knows? Because there's also a category for people who are just learning Welsh as a foreign language. As I said, who knows? Somehow it was very interesting because this seems very flat. You can see some hills around, but at times it seems very flat, which is most probably when you're kind of on top of a hill and then you go down. But Hereford, north of the river, is more flat than than Mid Wales. And Mid Wales the hills are so lovely. I don't mean to offend anyone, I really hope I don't, because I really love Mid Wales, but the hills are kind of human scaled, and they kind of remind me of Teletubbies and Hobbits. And whilst when you go to Scotland, and we've been to the west coast of Scotland, there are no hills, there are mountains, and they're so steep and dramatic. A very different feel to the countryside. But Wales is, I love Wales. Whenever I drive to see my friend, I drive mostly up the A49, which is still in Herefordshire. And whenever I turn left to go into Wales, there's always this sigh of relief and this warm embrace. It's amazing. It's just a lovely place. I don't think I told you yet about the cattle grids. So I did tell you that the roads are getting progressively narrower, and sometimes they get a bit wider and the stripe appears again, but on the whole, progressively narrower. And there are some places where there are cattle grids in the ground. And forgive me if I told you before, then close your ears for a bit. But I don't think I told it yet. A cattle grid, basically what people do is they dig a hole in the road and then they cover it with a metal grate. And the intention is that animals can't cross that grate because they cannot walk on those bars of metal, because they're quite far apart, so they can't stand on them. Well, unless you're a cat, I'm sure you can, but sheep and cows they can't move across, whilst a car can drive across it because the metals go left to right across the road. For pedestrians, there is usually a small gate next to the road and next to the cattle grid, so people can cross. Because on either side of the cattle grid there's a fence, and so animals stay in that confined area. So when you cross a cattle grid once, you know that most probably you're going to cross a cattle grid again, because it's to enclose a field. Also, quite far towards the end of this video, there is a gate crossing the road, and you see me getting out of the car, opening the gate, getting back in the car, going across, getting out of the car, closing the gate, getting into the car. And when the gate's closed that there are animals walking in the next bit. And the road just continues. It's a narrow road, but the road just continues. If you're squeamish, if you don't like animals, then maybe a better way is to turn around, because that there are animals in that area. And when you come to the next bit, which in my case was another gate, you have to get out and open the gate. And there was cattle walking around. I don't know if they were beef bulls or not. I didn't look, and at the moment I can't forward it to check. But yeah, if you don't want that, then don't enter it. If you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. And you never know what animals are inside that area. It being Wales, they've got loads of sheep, so it could be sheep, but in this case it were sheep and cattle. Anyway, which reminds me of one property I looked at when we were living in Wales, and it had 7 gates and 2 fords. And a ford is where water crosses the lane, which may seem lovely and idyllic on a warm summer's day. But believe me, when it's been raining for quite some time, it can transform into quite a stream where there's a lot of water coming through, and you need a car that's high on its wheels to cross it. And to backtrack even further, when I arrived in Wales, 7 weeks in, I got carted off by ambulance, blue lights and all the rest of it, to be taken to hospital with a burst appendix, which was the reason why I started studying alternative healthcare. That's a different story. But knowing that you can depend on an ambulance, that that the time may come that you need an ambulance, and if that ambulance needs to cross 7 gates and 2 fords, that's a lot, and you want to leave the gates as you find them. So if they're closed, you have to close them again. If they're open, you can leave them open, but if they're closed, you need to close them again. That is a lot for an ambulance, because ambulances don't come unless it's necessary. So that was a negative point towards that particular property. Also, to whenever you do a school run, whenever you go out for shopping, whenever you do anything at all, you have to get out of the car twice for each gate. So it's 40 times for a single trip just to get to the road. Never mind getting anywhere else. Then you're on tarmac, and your trip can officially start. So that doesn't always show on particulars that it's so tricky to get somewhere. But that property was 7 gates and 2 fords. It was a thing. I think, see, here I let that particular car pass. It had been behind me for some time, and as you can see, it disappears in the distance in no time flat. It really wanted to speed up, and maybe they know the road very well and know where they can speed up and have to slow down. I don't know the road, so I was going not slow, but slower than that car, that's for sure. It's another thing that people don't always take into consideration when they're buying a property, like the property I'm visiting on this particular trip, is to get materials in and out, and to go anywhere. If it's winter, and you will see how narrow the lane is. It's really narrow lane, the last bit. But what it doesn't really convey on camera is how steep it is. And even with a 4-wheel drive, a steep, narrow lane, it's not going to work if there's some frost. If you've got kind of main roads, there will be kind of tubs next to the road for tricky parts, where people know that there's always frost there. If it freezes, that's where the frost hits first. And those tubs contain grit or salt or a mixture, or something to give the car a bit of grip. But if it's freezing, then you can't get out of the house, which can be tricky. Personally, for myself, I don't mind being locked up in a house for a couple of weeks. But I think from the majority of the people who came to view that place, they hadn't considered it at all. And to get supplies in for building, as I mentioned before, the house. It either needed a lot of work done or needed to be replaced. And to get building supplies in, I will have to say that there are local building merchants who have smaller cars, smaller trucks. Here you see that I have to go to the left to let this car pass. I don't know why I stopped for a while, but yeah, I really have to dig in to the side to let the car pass. Anyway, so local building merchants will have a smaller car, but there are just, your building will be restricted by the size of the trucks that can deliver your supplies, or by the strength, the grip they've got. It's some places are very, very steep, and if building supplies are left at the end of your lane because that's as close as they can get, you have to manage to get it down to the building site by yourself, whether it's by hand or a smaller contraption. It's a lot of work, and not everyone is aware of that. And even if you are aware of it, are you prepared to do it? We went to see a property which was in Wales. We were living in Hereford, south of the river, and we looked at this property in Wales. And the track, it did have a track. The track was fine, but it was so steep that even with a four-wheel drive, in the four-wheel drive setting, it was an experience. Let's put it that way. So yeah, to get building supplies to that, and that was just an empty stone building with nothing in it. It used to be a house, but hadn't been lived in for a long, long, long time. Had been used as stables, and so it needed everything doing to it. Which reminds me, before when I said, that with the children I would drive up to a house and walk around and look through the windows. The houses where I do that is where I know for sure that there's no one living in there anymore, and it will be empty. I don't just rock up to a random house and go look through the window. That wouldn't be right. But the houses I go to when they're empty, when I know they're empty, yes, I can rock up and walk around it and look through the window. One house I looked at, it was, I don't know whether I told it in a different video, but it had a big barn with a weaving loom in it. It was amazing, and that loom was so big that the owners wouldn't be able to take it along to their next house. So for whoever bought the house, the loom was included because they were not going to take it down. It was I don't know if you could take it down, but they weren't going to. And it was so tempting. It was a lovely spot. I think it didn't have an awful lot of land. I can't remember what the issue was, or it was. I can't remember what the issue was. But I have to say, this weaving loom, it was really a selling point for me. Unfortunately, we did not end up with that particular house. The things you see and the things people throw in when they're selling a house, at times it's quite amazing. And as I said, a weaving loom for me would be a bonus. But someone once threw in a car, which was a classic car. For me, a not practical car. And I had no particular interest in that. I mean, sure, for people who are into cars, into classic cars, that might have been a selling point. But for me, it didn't push my buttons. Unlike a big loom. Yeah, that was the selling point for me, even though we ended up not buying the house. Now, this is a long trip, and when I planned the trip, as in kind of general, how do I get there? The internet suggested 2 different routes, and I thought if I go via one route and come back via the other route, then hopefully I could end up with 2 nice videos. And you will see that the estate agent did not expect anyone to arrive from this particular place, from this side of the building, which is weird. I mean, the lane doesn't stop at the small holding. There's a lane passing, so people could come from either way. And they had put the sign up only on one side rather than on both sides. So I passed it, and yes, it took me a while to figure out. In the end, I asked someone, as you will see in the video, I asked someone, do you know this area? And he said, well, not really. I said, well, I'm looking for this particular property. He said, oh, I've just been there. I said, oh, can you tell me where it is? And so he explained that was just further up the lane, and there was this sign saying, that this house was for sale. And the silly thing was, the estate agents, they had put one of the photos they used was the photo of a gate, and the gate was closed, and it had the name of the property on the gate as a thing. People do that quite often. Properties in Wales don't have numbers, they just have a postcode and a name, a property name. So this house has a property name. So I saw that gate with this sign of the property. So when I was driving on the lane and my sat-nav told me that I had arrived at my destination, I was looking out for that particular gate with the name on it. And to be helpful for everyone on that particular open day, they had opened the gate, so you couldn't see the gate, you couldn't see the name. It was such a silly thing. Nice that they want to be nice, but as I said before, it's quite normal to have gates closed if you want to keep livestock in, to have a gate closed across the road or across a lane. I was not impressed by that, but there we go. Another thing to consider when you move to the countryside, and this particular place was definitely the countryside, is internet. And internet is something I rely on for work, so I need good internet, and usually there isn't. Having said that, I have lived in weird places where they had amazing internet. So it's a bit hit and miss. This particular property, it was a miss. I was it was a miss for everything. I was walking around the property itself, over the boundaries. The intent was to walk the boundaries. I kind of failed at that, but that's a different story. And then I tried my phone to see if I could call the estate agents, and it was. There's always hope, but it was so unlikely, and indeed there was no signal for a mobile phone. The property did have telephone, but to get proper internet access, you would be very, very lucky. There's a cattle grid. There you go. Anyway, to get proper internet, that's a weird thing to say. Fast, high-speed internet. Let's put it like that. yeah, you'd have to be lucky to get that. And even if there's a fiber optic, is it fiber optic? Glass fiber. Anyway, if there's high-speed internet passing your property, it doesn't mean that your property is connected. And if you either have the house quite far from the road, or you envisage your dwelling to be far from the road, it costs an arm and a leg to have it installed. Quite often you're better off digging a trench yourself and or creating a different means, so they only have to pull the cable. But yeah, as you can see, there's sheep on the road, next to the road. There are signs, I don't know if you can read them, but on this trip there were various signs saying newborn lambs, just to warn you to be careful, because they can be they don't know the road yet, and they have to learn to be careful with cars. Having said that, there are old sheep as well who just stand on the road and maybe move, maybe don't. But yeah. So to come back to internet is a thing. There are people who are opting for Starlink. My son sent me some videos about Starlink, and that's not necessarily a route I would like to go. It's putting a lot of debris in the sky, because it needs lots of satellites, and I don't know if that's realistic. I don't know if that's healthy. And there are satellites that are further away. But for the moment, the price of those is very, very... The price of connecting to those satellites is very, very high. So, yeah, but I first have to figure out where I end up. I've located another piece of land, which I'm going to look at tomorrow morning, at the day of doing this voiceover. So I'll be going to visit that particular piece of land early in the morning, because I think that if there's a problem with that land, it might be early in the morning, because there's something in the way that obstructs the sunlight, and I want to know when the sun hits the land. And at this moment it's June, so the sun is high in the sky in this part of the UK. But if you are in winter and the sun doesn't hit your house at all, or your land, or hits it very late, that's cold. That's very, very cold. When we lived in mid Wales, our house was in the valley, and it was south facing, and we could see on the other side of the valley, we could see the houses on the north side of the hills, and they would have no sun at all during winter. Now, I'm not a sun worshipper, but flipping heck, it's nice to be warmed up by the sun in the winter. So yeah, I will have to figure out, and another cattle grid, I will have to figure out how obstructive this obstruction is, and if it would be the deciding factor for me to either go for that property or not go for that property. But that one is in Herefordshire, and more in an area where I would be looking if I were to buy in Hereford, if I were to buy land in Hereford. that would be a very good place to be when you look at, where Hereford City is and where other places are that I know and can work with. That would be interesting. A very different proposition from this trip and the small holding at the end of it. Very, very, very different proposition. It was also interesting to see when I drove home. I drove past a sign saying land for sale, so I did a U-turn and stopped and had a look. I later looked it up and it was only a small parcel. It was only 5 acres, I think it was. By the way, acres and hectares. So there's 2.5 acres in 1 hectare. So when I'm looking for 12.5 acres minimum, it's a minimum of 5 hectares I'm looking for. Anyway, how did I get to that? That particular property was only about 5 acres. So too small for me. And it was almost level, it was almost flat. It was on the edge of a village. It was all the things that the other property was. It was such a contradiction. I don't know what I end up with. But I have to keep an open mind, and the open mind is that if I end up in Herefordshire, north of the river, then that's most probably more. It won't be level, but there are some hills here. There are a couple of hills, but not like Wales. South of the river, yes, there are hills in the Golden Valley. The Golden Valley is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. But again, if you've got a property in the Golden Valley, then it can take you easily half an hour to get to a road, to a road that actually takes you somewhere. It's all narrow lanes, and it can be tricky to be moving around. So when you're there, you're kind of stuck, which is also a good reason to really, really enjoy the place where you live, rather than this will have to do. That's a different vibe. I think this is where we're getting to narrower lanes. I've still got a feeling that I'm a bit to the left, so there's still space, if you drive carefully and find a slightly wider bit that you can pass, but it's definitely getting narrower here. Interesting times ahead. What I would say for living in a place where you have to get to on narrow lanes, I visited a therapist once when I was in Wales and I was ill and needed to look after myself. And she lived, as the crow flies, not that far away, but because of the lanes and all the rest of it, it would take forever to get there. But getting there was beautiful in itself. Getting there would make you slow down. Getting there was part of the healing, and that's a plus side. That is a plus side as well. Anyway, I'm rambling at this moment. For a moment I thought, we've reached the gate, but it's the reflection of one of the air filters in the car. So you can see it on the right side of the screen, just because of how the sun hits it. But we will get to a gate shortly. Look at that. I thought I would do a short introduction to this video and then leave you to just enjoy the countryside. And here I am, an hour into it, and I'm still rambling. That's oh dear, yeah, one of those things. To come back to the other videos I make, so over the winter I've done a lot of knitting because, well, how do I put this? I'm not the size I am. I'm not the size I was before lockdown. And yeah, a lot of things don't fit me anymore. And there are things that have just come to the end of their life. So over the winter I've knitted quite a lot and documented that, which is fine. But I've also got videos on preserving food. And I've realized this week that I really need to do a video on the sauerkraut I made, or the maybe not so sauerkraut. So last year I made, well, quite to the end of the year, I think it must have been November, I would have to look it up, where I took white cabbage and cut it up, mix it up with a bit of salt, put it in a pot, and that was that. You let it be, and it becomes sauerkraut, which is one way to preserve the white cabbage, but it's also one of the methods, and I think it might be the only method that I can come up with that really changes the food and enriches it. So most of the ways of food preservation, you lose nutrients or you lose, taste or whatever. But with sauerkraut, it creates a new product, and it's very good for your digestive tract to eat homemade sauerkraut, or if you can't homemade it, sorry, had to cough. If you can't make it by yourself, to have untreated sauerkraut, so that it's not processed, because you want the bacteria that live in the sauerkraut. Anyway, so I made it, and all was well in the world and all the rest of it. And then my heating broke, so the house has been really cold for a long period of time. This is where I come to the gate. There you go. Well, not excited. I needed to adjust my space to get to the gate. Never mind. So in the winter, my heating broke down, and it was very cold, to the point that when I opened the fridge door, it was warmer inside the fridge than it was in my house, and my fridge was working perfectly. So there I was with a big pot with sauerkraut, and the thing with sauerkraut is, when you want it to stop fermenting, that's when you put it in a cold place. And my house was so cold that it stopped fermenting. I haven't opened the pot yet. I will do that whilst the camera is running, because I can open it only once. But I don't think it's sauerkraut. I think it's just, white cabbage in liquid. I cannot imagine it having fermented long enough to be actual sauerkraut. So yeah, I do document the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I'm pretty sure this is in the category ugly. It's something that I could not have foreseen. What I would have done normally is to have it fermenting, for quite some time, and you can see bubbles rising, and you can see that there's life in that jar. And before you think this takes very long for the picture to move again, it's just because the gate was particularly difficult to close. And as I said before, you have to leave the gates as you find them. And it was a tricky gate. I couldn't get it closed at my first attempt, or second or third attempt, which is not good because it needs to be closed. To come back to the sauerkraut. So sauerkraut you put in a pot, and you leave it to ferment, and you can see it fermenting because bubbles rise to the surface, and it stopped doing that very quickly. When it keeps on fermenting, you can taste it, and when you think it's sour enough, acidic enough, you can then put it in smaller jars and put it in the fridge, and that will stop the fermenting. Because my house was so cold, I think it stopped fermenting way, way, way too early. And I haven't used it because I wanted to open the jar as a kind of, things don't always go to plan. It's nice to be able to show things that work out, but if it doesn't work out, then you have to show it as well. Well, that's what I think, and that's also what I do with the knitting videos. Definitely not all my knitting goes to plan. So you either change plans or you rip out the knitting and start again. There's that. I still have to do that video. There's videos about drying food and putting things in jars, either by just boiling it, or the other one is to do it under pressure. So I can put meat in jars under pressure. I know my grandmother puts meat in jars with just boiling, but I'd rather do it under pressure. And the big advantage of putting food in jars is that you don't need any further energy to preserve it, which is a good thing. It just sits on a shelf and it's ready to be used whenever you want to. So here I come to the second gate. I told you before that usually when you go through a first gate there will be a second gate or a cattle grid. That's another alternative, but here it were 2 gates, and if you just saw those bovine beasts, it was interesting. I did keep an eye on them because you never know. They seemed quite young, and doesn't mean that they want bad things. They can be friendly, but they've got 4 legs, and I did gain weight, but I'm not as heavy as those animals. And even if they would just come and rub up against me, that would be a bit of a challenge to stay upright. Anyway, I didn't know at that moment in time, but I was so close to the property, so close yet so far. Interesting. It was so interesting. And for the estate agent to decide that this was, people were not going to come from this particular direction. Why? Most people in cars have got a sat nav of some shape or in some shape or form, whether it's on their phone or phone. I wouldn't recommend a phone when you go on a trip like this because it's not reliable. The signal is not reliable. But most people have got a sat nav, which is weird in a way because a sat nav, surely it works with some sort of satellite link. I don't really know. I've never looked into it, but the sat nav kept on working. It kept on working fine. But I'm very, very close, and I'm passing the place. Can't even tell you where it is at the moment, but and I also didn't know which side of the road it was, because by now I'm so deep into it, no idea. I didn't know whether I was approaching it from one way or the other. In the end, I could have looked at the particulars, because the lane I'm driving on, there's a little bit of that lane on the particulars. So I could have looked it up, but still, it could have been the next hill over. You never know. I don't know how many properties there are per postcode. But as you can see, there are few. Places to live are few and far between. So even if it's only 8, it would be, how far do you have to drive to cover 8 properties? Because the last property you saw was with the first gate. So I've done all this driving and no second property. Interesting times. Oh, and there's one place, I think is it here, where I stop for a moment, because, and I don't know if you can see it on your device, but under that tree are bluebells, and I'm trying to make some pictures of the bluebells. Here in Great Britain there are bluebell woods, and Wales has got its fair share of them. And it's just stunning. Over the years, whenever I've come to a bluebell wood, I've tried to take a video and post it online. It's not something I'm used to from the Netherlands, and the bluebells only flower for a very short period of time. But when you catch it at the right time, there's just this whole sea of blue at the woodland floor, and they emerge just before the trees get their leaves, and they will flower when the trees are just getting into leaf. So there's this fresh leaves above it, and then there's the blue on the floor, and it's amazing. It really is amazing. If you ever have the chance to go and visit a bluebell wood at the time when the bluebells actually flower, go for it. It's a sight to behold, and it just goes on and on and on. It's amazing. Now they do have invaders. They have the Spanish bluebell, and it's kind of pushing away the native bluebell. The native bluebells are protected, so you're not allowed to. I think you're not even allowed to gather the seeds of it. You can buy them through special sites, but yeah, you can't dig them up. You can't pick the flowers. There's a lot of things you can't do. I'm not sure if that's the best way to make sure that they stay there. That if you can grow bluebells from seed, that would be amazing. But if you're interested, look it up for yourself and use your own judgment. But the Spanish bluebell is invasive and is kind of pushing out the native bluebell. But bluebell woods are amazing, and as I said before, under that particular tree there were the remnants of a bluebell patch, because one tree doesn't make a woodland. And it was only a patch, but still beautiful. I'm now way past the property, and there will be some houses here in a bit, a farm, and I will aim to go to the main road and either go left or right, just to see, to orientate myself, and to also see what the sat-nav does, whether it will change. Sometimes it will jump a whole mountain, so to speak, and there's another road relatively parallel, and that's how you can reach other, how to say that, approach the same place from another side. I don't know if it would still be the same. I don't know. Anyway, I was going to orientate myself on the main road. That was the whole point of going beyond where the sat-nav told me that I had reached my destination, because there was nothing to be seen, no house to be seen. And yeah, in doing so, so here's the main road, and will I go left? Will I go right? In the end, I turn left, realize that that's not right, so I go around, and then I see the signpost for the property, and then I had to retrace my steps on the same lane to go to find the property. It's quite common to have a track leading up to your house, so it's not. It's a kind of gravel stuff, hardcore. It's not gravel. It's bits of rock. To go to your property. Just because it's very, very expensive to have it tarmacked or to have bricks laid or whatever. You do want some sort of hardcore stuff. Otherwise you would be driving on mud. And there's an end to that. Well, there's an end to hardcore as well. Because I had friends in Mid Wales, and they lived on such a steep hill. And at the time I was driving a Ford Transit, and it didn't, at the time Ford Transits didn't have four-wheel drive. Now there are some Ford Transits with four-wheel drives, but at the time it didn't have four-wheel drive. And for me it was very difficult to, not to go there, but when I wanted to go home again, to get up the first bit of hill. Going down it was fine, going up it was a bit of a thing. See, me reversing. I think this might be the gentleman I asked for directions. Is it? Do I stop? I think so. And they, those friends, they had a four-wheel drive, and they said, "Oh, if you can't make it, no problem, because we've got a four-wheel drive." And I know there's a setting, four-wheel drive setting. Is it in four-wheel drive? Yeah. And he couldn't get me onto the top of the hill, and as it turned out, he hadn't put it in four-wheel drive. So yeah, one of those things. But it's the trials and tribulations I've had with the Ford Transit, living in Wales and visiting friends and viewing properties. It's that quite a bit. And I loved the car. I absolutely loved the car, but it had no traction whatsoever. If it met with anything slippery or anything other than, level hard standing. We've had some adventures with it, and one winter I've been driving around with tree trunks in the back of the van because I'd visited a friend, and it wasn't the angle, so it wasn't steep or anything, but it was just snow, and people had driven over the snow, so it was just ice, and the car just did not want to play ball. We made a track out of carpet tiles, and I weighed down the back of the car because that's where the traction was. I weighed down the back of the car to get grip. And she lived on an estate. There was no one around, and so there were tree trunks. So I helped myself to tree trunks. Drove around it with tree trunks in the back of my van for a couple of weeks, and then I went over and brought them back, and only then someone spoke to me saying, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" So I explained, and he wasn't too pleased, but there was no one there to ask the first time around, so. And I didn't intend to keep the tree trunks. I just wanted to get out of there. And I used the tree trunks as load, as ballast. So as you can see, this is the third time I have to go in reverse. I think it's something you have to get used to reverse, quite long distances on your mirrors, because turning around doesn't make it easier turning around in your chair, not for long distances. So do it on your mirrors. It's a skill. As you can see, going through that second gate, I was so close. Oh man. It's nice though. It is something I will miss once I've found my property, once I've, got my thing. I will miss going out and about looking for properties. It's a thing, and I really enjoy it. You get to places where you've never been before. I mean, I've never been there before, and I've never been in quite a wide surrounding around there. I've never been there before, so it's nice to get to places where you've never been before, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I mean, who wouldn't love this? Maybe not to live, to live there takes weird people like me, but to explore and to go, or to be there for a while, to get some therapies and get some good food and fresh air, yes, it's just amazing. And look at those hills, they do look like Teletubby hills. They're lovely. They're really lovely. And you would, if there was a hobbit crossing the road, you would not be surprised. It's just such a nice, welcoming area. It's beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Sorry, that's me gushing over mid-Wales. Almost there. Ta-da! So this is the lane leading up to the property. This grassland does not belong to the property. It's the land on the other side of the stream, as far as I remember. already see the incline on the left. Small barns. And parking in the field. If you enjoy this, please like, subscribe and share. Mainly subscribe. That's very important. Thank you for watching, and until we meet again next time. Thank you. Bye bye.